Hello and welcome back once again to the HRSocialHour half-hour podcast. This is episode 48. Jon and Wendy talk to Andi Devers. I'm your host, Jon.
And I'm Wendy. How's it going, Jon?
Well, Happy New Year, Wendy.
Yes, 2019.
Hard to believe.
Weird.
It's not quite there yet, but as we pull back the curtain, 2019 is going to start kind of on a sadder note from an HR podcast perspective. We found out that our good friends Mark and Dennis over at Hostile Work Environment have wrapped up their show.
Yeah, with no notice. They just kind of sprung it out there, didn't they?
Yeah, I think that's probably not necessarily the worst way to go. So, it's obviously a bit of a shock, but I'm sure it's something they thought a lot about. And, as I mentioned on social about the time that it actually happened, I'm sorry that they did it, but I certainly understand why and glad that they have the content that they have out there. And I'm extremely thankful that we got to spend time with them, not only to record our show, their show, and then I had a chance to talk with them again at ASHRA this year or in 2018. It was coming out in 2019, but in ASHRA, the ASHRA conference was one of the highlights of that year, getting to meet those guys and spend time with them. So I told them they've got an open seat here anytime they want to come on, once the dust settles and they get that Jones in to start podcasting again. But we wanted to wish Mark and Dennis well. We're sorry to see that they're gone, at least for the time being. If you've not listened to Hostile Work Environment, take time after you listen to our show, of course, go check them out, hwpodcast.com, listen to our show with them, listen to all their other content. Two employment attorneys that make what they do a lot of fun. And they will certainly be missed in terms of podcast content, but glad to know they're still out there doing what they're doing. And we wanted to make sure that we mention that.
Yes, definitely. And we do wish them well. And I expect we'll see them at least on our podcast, and maybe we'll see them at some events where we can have some very special episodes with some fun cases that they find and just can't not share. Very bad grammar there, but best way to put it in my mind.
Well, I think you said it well. Well, enough about not so great part of what we're doing, or the sad part when saying farewell to a podcast. I'm really excited about this podcast and our guest. I'm going to let you make the introduction and we will get started.
Yes. So excited to welcome Andi Devers tonight. She is an HR technologist and change management expert. She has built her career in global HR compliance, HR process improvement, and shared services across all functions of HR. It was a pleasure to meet her this summer at SHRM 18, and so I hope we'll get to see her again soon. But for now, Andi, welcome to the show, and what's in your glass?
It's chilly here in the Pacific Northwest, and I'm having a hot cup of tea to help keep me warm. What about y'all?
I will be having a glass of wine soon, but I just walked in the door from work, so haven't had a chance to open the bottle yet.
And I am sitting in a hotel room in Chattanooga, Tennessee, of all places, enjoying some water because I need to hydrate while I travel. But Andi, I told Wendy I don't know if we had a chance to visit at all in Chicago or not, and I'm sorry for that. I don't know a lot about your background. How exactly did you get started in HR?
Oh yeah, and we didn't get to chat a ton in Chicago because SHRM was just go. But I happened into HR. I'm one of those HR people. I'm actually a scientist by education, and took a job at Target stores out of college, and they needed an HR manager, and they stuck me in that position because I had some experience doing a lot of leadership and like organizational stuff, and somehow that qualified me to be in HR at the time. And I just fell in love with it. I know people, it's funny, sometimes I talk to people who are, how do I get into HR? I can't get in. And then I tell them my story and they're like, seriously? I'm like, yeah, I know. But that's how it happened.
There's a lot of us like that.
What type of science were you pursuing?
Oh, okay. I was actually, I completed my biology degree and I was pre-med. So I was actually waiting to apply and go to medical school, and decided I'd get some work experience underneath my belt while I was waiting to do that and, studying up on MCATs and such. So I feel like I bring a lot of those skills, that research, analytics, problem solving. I bring a lot of that into my HR work, which is kind of interesting how I've been able to cross skill some of the skill sets.
I think you're the first pre-med person
Really?
we've had on the show. That's very interesting. And throw you in with,
so.
Yeah. We've had a nuclear engineer. I think Mary Faulkner was going into physics. So yay. It's just fascinating, where everybody came from and how we got to where we are. So, your current title, I believe, is like an HR business partner. What do you really enjoy about that? And how do you go about building relationships, not only with your customers, but peers that are considered HR, quote, specialists, those that do recruiting, benefits, that kind of thing?
Well, the great thing about that business partner role, and I know it's a bit of a buzz term in HR right now. That's kind of like the job to have nowadays, but it really is working very closely with business leaders. And understanding what are they trying to achieve and the people impacts of that, but then also being able to work so closely with so many other HR specialists. So I partner all the time with our benefits folks, employee relations, so employment attorneys, HR systems folks, and those are just some of the people that come off the top of my head. So apologies up front if you're in an area that I didn't mention, but it really is an area where you can touch all areas of HR and then also make an impact back to the business.
Do you run much into, I'm going to use the term turf war because that's not the best way to put it, but having worked in organizations previously that had what I would call generalist manager, business partner, those folks in the field really kind of embedded day to day. And then you've got, I'm going to call it a corporate function, whether people hate me for that, I'm sorry, but those centralized things. Do you ever run into any strife over that?
Strife, aka silos, perhaps? Yeah, sure. And
Sure.
It's sure. I'll be honest there. And it's never intentional. It's never intentional. And I think that's too with my process improvement hat on is in that process. It's really just understanding roles, responsibilities, who's on point, and then really collaboration skills. So understanding this is what we're trying to solve for and how can we work together to get back to that end. And generally what I have found is that if I go in with clear expectations, a clear idea about what problem we're trying to solve for, and I take me out of it, and I can usually get to that collaboration piece. And all right, so how do we work together to get this done? And then, hey, how do we make this more efficient next time we go through this? And how do we share that?
I like that.
I totally agree. And yeah, I like I said, I use strife I think strife is better than turf war. I think what I always found was that, sometimes I think people get so wrapped up in the function that they don't necessarily see the business, right? I think especially when you're someone like you that's, I'll use the term embedded, but if you're out there in it, it's a different perspective. And so sometimes it really is helping people to understand that, hey, I get that we have to look at these things, but it's also very, very important that we understand the business. And I think that's where sometimes there's that rub, right? And that you got to keep one foot in here, one foot over there.
Absolutely.
So I certainly understand the pain.
And I think one of the benefits that I personally have is I've been in a center of excellence before, and I've been out, in the field or with the business, whether that's in a field office or as an expat. So I also have that perspective of what it's like on the other side of the HR fence, if you will, and then working together to message that back out to the business and to get the right business outcomes, which really helps.
Andy, you've spent the last several years working in the tech space, and curious, I think we've had maybe a couple of guests in the past that work similar realm, but are there challenges that you've seen from an HR perspective working in tech and kind of where you are now that maybe you haven't encountered elsewhere in the past?
I feel like if I would have tried to answer this question, 5 years ago even, I would have said, yes, there's absolutely differences. But, I feel like everyone has the same problems around, if I can use the quote with my air quotes here, if y'all could see it, but with the war for talent and finding people who are technical, who are analytical, who are strategic with an emphasis in customer service. And people in the tech industry are asking for those things, as well as sales, sales functions, sales companies, hospitality. We're all wanting those skill sets and those types of employees. So I think that there's some specific jobs or functions around that, but the actual talent and some of the problems that we have, I don't know that they're unique to tech anymore. Everyone wants good benefits. Everyone wants work-life balance, remote work, telework, great people and great salaries and all those pieces. And so I don't see that divide anymore like I used to.
I think as one of our previous guests called it, it's the talent puddle.
Yes, I like
regardless
that.
of where we are, and I'm in construction primarily, right? And it's the same. We obviously look for people that have certain skills, but it is very difficult to identify. And I don't want to say it's nice to hear, but it's good to hear that that's not any one place. So just like it's a programmer as opposed to a skilled equipment operator, it's the challenges are unfortunately all the same across the board.
I know. So the process improvement person in me says, well, that's actually not a bad thing. So there's a lot of learnings that we can get from each other across different industries and functions as HR practitioners. The recruiter in me kind of thinks, ooh, well, it's still a problem, right? Like, how do we get the right people on board and retain them, or how are we developing them? So it's an interesting problem to have right now.
I think the good news is we're gonna have it for a while. Or bad news, according to how you want to look at it.
Well, that's why we need to work together on some of it too. So I like that. Well, Andi, and one of the reasons that, we know you is because you're a blogger and you've been blogging for a while. You've got a personal blog. You write for Workology. You've been on the SHRM blogging team. So we have to know, what are some of the highlights of being a blogger?
I love blogging, and my time spent in blogging has gone up and down just as life changes and as work and career changes. But I started blogging back in 2009, which the blogging and that space and social media has changed so much. But I would definitely have to say my highlights are, and this might sound kind of cheesy, but it's true, I love networking and meeting other bloggers, other people in the space. It's been incredible to see the amount of growth of HR practitioners in the space and sharing and connecting. I love my relationship at SHRM. So I've been a very active member of my local chapters, and that's actually where I started part of my, blogging journey and around networking. And so I really do love and appreciate the relationship that I've been able to build with SHRM. And that's just, a lot of that's for me personally, but also just being able to give back, particularly as an HR person who doesn't have an HR degree. Those first few years within HR was leaning on other HR practitioners and, going to meetings and saying, hey, I have this going on. How would you handle this? Those are some of the things that I would consider, highlights.
Well, it sounds like highlights to me, and I'm going to have to agree with you. I think that's been the great part of blogging and getting involved, and that ability to give back. Plus, we get to meet great people like you, so it's awesome. Well, Andi, it is now time for everyone's favorite part of our show, the half-hour question connection. Do you remember how you first connected with us?
I know the first time we met in person was definitely at the last SHRM conference, but I know I'd been reading and following y'all on Twitter for some time before that. So I don't have a date. I'm sorry. But
we don't either.
Yeah. But I I remember
this is more for us. Like, how do we know you?
Yeah, we definitely synced up around the SHRM blogging teams. But I had been reading and following y'all, well before that. So I was just excited to be able to meet y'all in person and just that, have that connection of that real presence and not just an online friendship.
Andi, can you talk to us a little about how networking's helped in your career and what's been really effective for you when it comes to networking?
I can. Networking, that old adage is not about, it's all about kind of who you know. There's some truth to that. So it's definitely helped, not only from a career perspective, but, like I mentioned earlier, sometimes you're hitting your head on something and it's, hey, I just need another perspective on how this might work or what this might look like, and just being able to have that sounding board. So there's definitely been some personal and professional pieces. And I felt kind of bad because I don't know that I'm the best networker. I'm totally friendly. I'm very upbeat, a lot of positive energy. But when it comes to networking, I really have to put a lot of effort into it. So I am the person who will put it on my calendar. I want to talk to 4 people this month, and then I'll pick the people. I'd be very, very mindful of it. Whereas I think about other people who it just comes so naturally to them. It helps to have a plan, understand what you're trying to accomplish, who you want to speak with. I oftentimes even come with questions and kind of a starter to kind of get things going so that people understand a little bit about me and what I hope to get out of networking with them, and what I also think they might gain out of networking with me as well.
I like that. So, Andi, who do you read and follow for HR insights?
Man, quite a few. Of course, I'm a big follower of the SHRM blog. I love Jennifer McClure. I've been really into Adam Grant lately, actually just since the latest conference. So usually every 6 months, I'm kind of cycling through. I'm trying to think of some others off the top of my head. I've been really into a benefits space lately. So I've been doing a lot of hashtags around wellness and benefits, work-life hashtags. There's a lot of cool things going on in that space as well. I was going to say, and of course, Workology, and I always love, I always like y'all's tweets and your podcast as well.
I tell you, we're going to go broke sending out checks.
I was like,
thank you.
Yeah. But thank you.
Well, Andi, you mentioned SHRM a little earlier in terms of your involvement locally and being engaged there. How else do you enjoy giving back to the HR community?
I think blogging and getting information out there is certainly one way. But something I'm really passionate about, and it goes a little bit back to how I got my start in HR, is I'm super passionate about helping new grads get into HR. So I have started several HR, I guess like new to HR mentoring groups and mentoring circles. I'm trying to connect them with either internship opportunities or opportunities right out of school so they can get their feet wet. And I found just a lot of joy and a lot of goodness out of doing that kind of work. And I'm very passionate about HR, and I'm just, when I was in school, I guess just being in the College of Natural Sciences, I wasn't in the School of Business, so I had no idea that there were people who did the kind of work that we do, and that it was so much more than just hiring and firing people. So people who feel like they are called to do that type of work and they're studying for it, I really like being involved in growing the next generation of HR people.
That's pretty cool. I like that. Helping the little ones.
Absolutely.
Helping the next generation. All right, Andi, what is your favorite movie?
It rotates, but coming off of the holidays, I cannot get through a holiday season without watching a lot of Elf. So I'm elfed out right now, but it's always the first movie that comes to mind, and particularly this type of year. And then Die Hard, which I can watch all year round.
We'll throw it out there because it is that time. Is it? Do you consider Die Hard a Christmas movie?
It is.
It's totally a Christmas movie.
Yes!
It's totally a Christmas movie.
Yes! Take that, Wendy. We've talked about adding that as a question for this question connection, and there you go.
Oh.
Yes.
Well, I'm
Thank you. The check truly is in the mailman.
Yeah. My next campaign is going to be Last Christmas is not really a Christmas song.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not. It's a breakup song. Oh,
well,
right.
speaking of music, Andy, what about your favorite musician or band?
I love the Red Hot Chili Peppers and have been a fan for a number of years, particularly some of their older stuff. But yeah, it's probably one of my favorite bands. Dave Matthews.
I don't think anyone said the Red Hot Chili Peppers yet. Bringing up that 90s music.
Yeah, that was just a great era for music. And
it really was. I agree. How about a favorite TV show?
I watch a lot of TV. And I hate admitting that too. I don't know that I have a favorite TV show. I'm trying to think about something that I can watch over and over again. It's probably The Office, the U.S. version. I know that a lot of folks are divided between the UK and the US version, but I really enjoy The Office.
That's over and over and over again, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And my heart always goes out to Toby, the HR guy. But as HR people, how many times have you walked into some of those situations? Or you have a Jim, you have a Pam, you have a Dwight. I mean, it's funny, but it also resonates oftentimes with me.
Too much sometimes, right?
Andy, we always look for connection, and we connected over Die Hard being a Christmas movie. And I have to say, too, you mentioned The Office about a month ago, or however long in podcast time now. They actually did an auction of Office props, and I mean down to the phones, the individuals' phones, but they had Toby's green. He had that green foam bone that was in his office. That was, and I was about a hair away from bidding on it just to see, because I would love to have something from that show. Who knows what it went for? I didn't follow it because it was already, it was probably more than I wanted to spend. I was like, well, maybe I'll buy it for myself as like a Christmas present. But they had Pam's desk. Can you imagine buying a desk at an auction? It was bananas. It was. I didn't see what the numbers vetted out, but the fact that every major character you could buy their phone is hysterical. Right? That some prop shop was just like, we're done, get it out of here. Absolutely. I should have looked at it. I should have kept track of it, but that particularly that bone in Toby's office was so unique. Thought, well, if I put that up in my office, would people get it? Would they know what it is?
Probably not, but maybe a hardcore fan.
Probably not.
The great thing about that is there's probably someone out there who can or has done a replica of it. So you might be able to have your own replica.
Oh, I'm sure. When you're not watching Elf or Die Hard and you're not listening to the Chili Peppers, Dave Matthews, and not watching The Office, what else do you like to do outside of work?
My goodness, I have a very young child, so I have a 3-year-old toddler. So I feel like most every free moment I have when I'm not working or trying to blog or any of those other things is spent with him, which is, he just brings me so much, joy. And sometimes a little bit of frustration. We're in, I guess, a terrible threes. We just crossed over and we're working on potty training, and but I've learned so much about myself, just becoming a parent. I have all those things that people say about having kids are just, they kind of, all those cliches just ring true. But I spend a lot of time with the family outside of work.
Awesome.
They are
fun. Sometimes they remind you of your employees. Sometimes.
Yeah, totally. You know what? He's gone through the funniest phase, and where and I knew it was going to be coming, but he's into Batman. And so whenever we get home, he talks about putting on his Batman outfit. And so he kind of gears up and such. And he just started insisting that he wears the Batman outfit to school. This weekend, I'll be looking for another Batman outfit. So you can rotate them so he's not wearing the same dirty one or trying to wash it every evening. Yeah.
Yeah, you need the rotation.
Andy, he's much too young, but you could always tell him that when you talk to him, my claim to fame is I was killed in the Batman comic a year and a half ago. My friend's the writer on Batman. My friend's been writing Batman for about 3 years now, and he killed a bunch of his friends when I was killed in Batman. So that's Michael Vandervoort's favorite thing about me. But yeah. Granted, I know he's 3 and wouldn't get it, but
we're trying to keep to, I guess, the more lively aspects of Batman. We haven't quite gotten to
Brave and the Bold Batman. Yeah, I get it. Well, I was not killed by Batman. I was just killed in the comic.
Okay. I was like, we will save that nugget for when he's older, though.
Maybe
I'll bring him out to a Sherm conference when he's older, and then we can have that chat. That'll be good, though.
There you
go.
And Andy, if you were not in the HR profession, what do you think you'd be doing?
There's a good shot that I'd probably be doing something medically, or medicine related. I guess something that might just be kind of fun, or something that maybe I might want to do when I retire and kind of get out of the HR life. It's probably be a professor. And I know that's kind of a common answer, but the whole idea of like writing tests and giving tests and grading and using different colored pens, I love all that kind of stuff. I would totally be like that weird, freaky, out there professor. Totally.
You could do that with employee evaluations. You could get the different colored pens and get some stickers.
Could you imagine?
That might be fun.
Good job. Well, I can't imagine going to college and writing stickers. They're going to think I'm cuckoo. But I would probably say I'm doing something education related, the collegiate level or something. Would probably be what I might be doing if I wasn't in HR.
That's awesome.
Well, Andy, we're glad that you're not practicing higher ed. We're glad that you're not in medicine, because if you were, we probably wouldn't know you, and we certainly wouldn't be talking to you tonight. So glad that's not the case. I do want to congratulate you, though. You've successfully completed the question connection. You survived our conversation at large, and we really are very, very appreciative of you being with us tonight. For our listeners that don't know you, that aren't following you right now, knowing after they've heard you, they're going to want to, tell us what's the best way for them to reach you out there.
Yeah, so I am the girl in HR on Twitter and Instagram, and whenever I have new blog posts, I'll make sure that they're up in those locations. But yes, please follow me on Twitter and Instagram.
We will make sure to add that to the show notes. Wendy, how about you? How can the listeners find you out there?
The best way to find me is on my blog, mydailyjourney.com. Daily is D as in dog, AILEY. And also be sure you mark the fourth Sunday of each month, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, for our monthly Twitter chat. We will be back in January with a whole new year and fun conversations. How about you, John?
Easiest way to find me, HRSocialHourPodcast.podbean.com. You'll find links to all my social there. And while you're there, if you listen to this show and there are shows that you haven't heard, like, for example, that hostile work environment show that we did, download, rate, review, subscribe, whatever platform you may be listening on, whatever you can do to help us continue to boost the signal. We always really, really do appreciate it. So again, Andy, thanks for being with us. And so for the HR Social Hour Half Hour Podcast, I'm John.
And I'm Wendy. And as always, be sure to connect,
give back, and network.
Network.
Take care, everyone.
We'll see you soon.